as a feather, I'm floating through space. Gonna get solutions sent to my face. Gonna take my time, life ain't a race. Just give into a podcast embrace. All right. Welcome, everybody.
All right. Welcome.
I am Graham.
I am Jake.
And Ashkan's still away for just a little bit longer.
Yeah.
In the meantime, still here, still podcasting.
Still living it.
Still living it. Still rocking out the construction questions.
Loving them.
And speaking of which, here's another one.
Oh, goodness.
Is there anything that I should pay special attention to for existing plumbing and water supply when I am choosing a space?
It's quite the pointed question. Certainly not vague. All right. Yeah. Actually, this jumps into that looking at existing amenities for a space, right? Like we're curious what's going on with electrical. We're curious what's going on with HVAC, and we're obviously curious what's going on with our plumbing supply and our drainage. One, how deep is that sewer main? We're got to be getting rid of all this water from all these showers and these tanks. It's a very different story if my sewer main is 3 feet down versus a sewer main that's like 8 feet down as far as cost goes.
Or 16 feet down.
Or 16 feet
Which
down.
is the case with one of our clients.
One of our past apprentices.
They had to terminate their lease that they had already signed and been like, we actually can't afford to run all the plumbing that we need to.
It involved earth bracing, all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to walk away.
Until they mentioned that was not even something that was on my radar to pay attention to.
Right,
But that can actually make or break a space. It's just the depth of your existing
for sure. Like, we were lucky.
plumbing,
Ours was not that deep, Like, you don't know a problem until all of a sudden you see somebody else and you're like, ooh, that looks like it stung. All right. Where that thing's at, how can you access it? Like, is your space, again, above a parking garage or something like that? Like, how is drainage going to happen? Do you need to build a raised subfloor to accomplish your drainage because the landlord won't let you cut into the slab? Or is there maybe a bunch of conduit running through that slab that you'll only find out once you start x-raying the slab during the due diligence phase? So drainage, clearly a big thing for us. And then also the other side of that I think people forget a lot, the supply lines coming into your shop, making sure you actually have enough water. A lot of supply lines are 3/4 of an inch. And if you're close to the street and you're on the first floor of a building and you only have, like 4 tanks or something like that, that might be sufficient for you if you don't have neighbors using a bunch of water. Once you start moving farther away from the source, and depending on the size of your property, and if you actually, like if you're on a second story, where, you're losing like that half PSI per foot that you're climbing in height, that's going to change your requirements. Like, you may end up looking at this being like, wow, I need to bring in a new water main. And maybe I'm looking at 1.25 inches as far as my diameter for my pipes, because I'm going to be running 6 showers. I'm going to be running laundry. I'm going to have all these things going on. And if you don't appropriately size, what's the downside? What happens? Zero pressure. People are floating, and then they go to jump in your shower, and it's a drizzle. It's a dribble, if anything. We actually went through this at Float On.
Yeah, we've been having some issues recently with more water pressure, largely as a result of some work that neighbors had done. Yeah.
One of our neighbors
works
came
that had
in.
been done before and not quite documented properly. And anyway.
Long story short, our water pressure got squelched, and now we're in the process of trying to update that. We've done a few bypasses past all the crazy stuff that they did, and we got back to a decent pressure, but still we have less because they're pulling all the water they're pulling. Our next step, and we're working with the city right now, is to tear up the parking lot behind Float On, and we're going to run a brand new supply line with a sub meter and all this other stuff, just so that we never run out of pressure again at our shop.
That, by the way, is kind of the stuff that you have to do if you didn't do due diligence moving into your space, and then you realize you need to upgrade. It's like, well, now we need to tear up this sidewalk or this parking lot or whatever, and add in a bunch more cost for the labor and the extra permits from the city. And it's not a small project. And not to say that if you're in love with the space and the supply line isn't big enough and you do need to do upgrades, that is a disqualifier. Just like mentally account for that, right? You're like adding
much better to do it in the beginning.
Yeah, a hefty cost on.
Yeah. How do we determine what's the right size? Well, you communicate effectively with your contractor. Every one of those units, like every one of the showers, every sink, every washer that you have on your space,
toilet.
Yeah, every toilet, they have a certain calculation associated with them with how much cubic feet of water is moving through that fixture, and then you basically have a total for your whole space, and then you determine a few other things like how far you are from your water source and everything. Clearly, if you're only 40 feet away, you can get much more pressure on a smaller line, whereas if you're 200 feet away, you need a bigger line to keep that 40 to 60 psi or whatever. But just communicate with your contractor. Make sure they understand that you're going to be running however many showers at the exact same time, and you may be doing laundry, and they should be able to help you decide on an appropriately sized line. I think I have another thing about drainage that I actually forgot. I kind of like to get it written out on the floor plans from the landlord where it's actually located on the property. Is it running directly under my space? We know somebody that went through a nightmare where the landlord just with pencil drew on a floor plan, like, hey, the sewer main is right here. The tenant accepted it. They went to start breaking ground. They started excavating. They couldn't find the sewer main. Turns out that the records that the landlord had were incorrect, and the sewer main was actually underneath a neighboring spot, which threw their build out back several months because you need to bring in a new supply line. You need to do all this other stuff because you can't just cut up a neighbor's spot. So kind of crazy. And if they don't know, you could always pop for a drain scope, which means, spend a little money, have somebody come out. They can stick a camera down one of the main drains, through a clean out or something like that. That camera's got a little magnet on it, and they basically inspect the lines. What they're looking for are breakages in the lines, do you have roots coming through, anything like that. And also with that magnet, you can determine where the path of the drain is going and the depth of that drain. So if things get wishy-washy and you're not really sure, drain scope, never a bad idea.
Probably just a good thing to do before you hop on and sign a lease regardless.
I
feel like if we were moving into a new building,
$110.
I would want to drain scope it.
Oh, yeah,
and just
for sure.
check it out. Just as part of, again, our own due diligence.
We're paranoid
too.
fellows, though.
Yeah, we are. We are pretty paranoid. But again, you just see these things go wrong, and all of a sudden your sewer main is under your neighbor's space.
Yeah.
And you're just I don't want to have to deal with that. I always think of small expenses like that as the very cheap insurance.
Right.
That you only have to pay once as opposed to monthly. You know what I mean?
What do we do if you can't afford to upgrade, if you can't get to something, if it's a huge project and the building owner won't let you upsize? We have seen a few people utilize pressure boosters. Basically, it's a holding tank. Your supply line comes in. It pressurizes that supply line, so then you get a little more pressure out to your shower heads and everything like that. I usually see those on well systems where somebody's working off a well instead of a municipal water supply, though. But we've seen it in both things. One caution from our contractor, the reason we actually didn't just install a pressure booster is we had older lines, and we ran the risk of putting a pressure booster on there. Not our lines, but the lines outside of our shop shared with our neighbor spaces. And, they were worried that we might potentially rupture one. And they were also worried that if we put a pressure booster in our system, we might pull sediment from our neighbor's water heaters through our lines back into our stuff and then start clogging up our shower heads and things like that. So again, there are options other than fighting with the city for 3 months and cutting up your parking lot, but everything comes, as you probably heard me say over and over again, everything comes with trade-offs. It really does. So.
And I guess, one last thought on existing plumbing when you're moving in is definitely keep in mind that this is plumbing for oftentimes your entire building. So you're not just counting up the fixtures in your space. You're not just counting on what you're doing, and that's going to determine the supply line size. You're counting everything. And sometimes that even includes past construction. So it could be that people in the building prior in your exact same space had already added in a bunch of fixtures, and then the person before you in that space took them all out. And so you kind of need to do some research and find out what's on file with the city as the maximum number of fixtures that they've actually hit for your whole building space. And anyway, there's this extra step where you kind of just need to realize you're not the only one oftentimes that's pulling off of that same water supply.
Super unfortunate if all of a sudden you realize there was work done on a property that was unpermitted, because those costs, they're going to fall on you as the new tenant. Possibly on the landlord, but often we see it fall on the tenant.
Yeah, the landlord's really going to try to make sure that it doesn't fall on them.
Yeah, they're real good at that, real slimy. by me.
Almost like they're professional.
Yeah, it's almost like they have a game of taking our money. I guess one other note when I'm thinking about drainage and supply and everything, where are the stacks for the toilets already located? Are you going to be utilizing existing stacks? And by stack, I just mean the drainage directly underneath your toilet. Where are those located? Because if you start moving those around, you do open yourself up to some more ADA scrutiny. Those new bathrooms will need to be compliant. Whereas if you have an existing bathroom, you may not need to make that compliant. And as you probably heard on some of my other shows, my stance is that I wish everything was ADA compliant. But, there's costs. There's things there. You know what I mean? There might be a benefit to leaving that one toilet in that corner and building a brand new, beautiful ADA bathroom over here so that you still have two. So, yeah, I think that's kind of my last thought on that.
Cool.
All right.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah,
and
that's all right.
if just like all of them, they're amazing.
They're all right. They're pretty good.
And our answers are so-so, but the questions...
the answers are
those
terrible.
Are spectacular.
But the questions...
Piece of art. And if you have your own, go to floattanksolutions.com/podcast. I was going to say it.
You're going to say it this time?
Well,
all right. No.
It's
you know
only
what?
because you do a better job than I do.
Okay, well, here, I'll do the floattanksolutions.com.
Okay, bye, everyone. Talk to you tomorrow.
Have a great day.